So where I left off, this is part 2 of the project for module 7. So where I left off was saying that since this 1901, our sample mean is very close to our 1944 national mean, it's not that surprising that we're saying we don't think that we fail to reject the null hypothesis. Because remember, when we have a two-tailed hypothesis test, we're saying that we fail to reject this. So we're saying there's not enough sufficient evidence to say that they do differ, is what we're saying. So that's most of this section here for the hypothesis test and interpretation. You do need to put these like in the words that make sense for you and your situation. Remember, this is one sample looking at New England. You might be looking at a different region. The last thing we need to do is look at this question 3. That's where it talks about how to calculate a confidence interval for the sample. So let's go do that real quick. So the first thing we need to do is find our margin of error. Also, so we know that we're doing a significance level of 0.05. So that we also know, we need to find our standard deviation. So there's 2 ways to do it. You can either, the idea is that your standard deviation is the square root of your variance. Remember, variance is standard deviation squared. So you can either do the formula, the STDEV.S, and find your standard deviation, or you can also just take the square root of your variance. Either way works. So when we're looking for our margin of error, that's going to equal confidence.t. Remember, we're using the t distribution. So we're going to say alpha, and it gives you our standard deviation, and then our sample size is n. Oops, we definitely have one too many parentheses. All right, so there's our margin of error is 58. So to find our lower bound and upper bound, third time's a charm. Our lower bound is going to be our sample mean. That's our 1901. Subtract our margin of error. Our upper bound is going to be that sample mean plus the margin of error. So we have this is our 95% confidence interval. And remember, if our hypothesized mean is in there, which it is, 1944 is in that range of values, we would fail to reject the null hypothesis. So in this example, the results agree. Now, if your results don't agree, then there's a mistake somewhere, either in your confidence interval or your hypothesis test. So definitely run back and check that. But you might see a different result if you choose a different region or end up with a drastically different sample within the New England region. So that's how to do the confidence interval and how you kind of compare it to your two-tailed hypothesis test. And then the idea here is you do your final conclusion, you summarize your findings, and discuss whether you were surprised by the findings. I want to point out that's a really important thing in general because you should go into this with some kind of expectations. I recommend, before even diving in and doing this hypothesis test, just look at your sample mean and your sample for both variables, for the square footage and for the listing price, and see how they compare to the national average. So just go in with some expectation of what you think will happen and then decide if you were surprised or not. Because if you are surprised, it might point out that there was a mistake somewhere. If you're not surprised, and that's good when something agrees with your expectations. But in like statistical analysis in like the real world, this could point to some issues or either a data issue or a sampling issue. So it definitely would be cause for a little bit of extra analysis and little data digging. So it's important to analyze. So that's a little highlight reel for the project this week. If you guys have any questions or need any help, just reach out to me. Use that general questions discussion thread. All right. Good luck this week.